A very good afternoon. So we are all back from lunch and we are about to begin our plenary session 2. Just before the session begins, I would like to announce once again Chairman Professor Biswajit Das, Director Center for Culture, Media and Governance, Jamia Millia Islamia, New Delhi, to please take a seat on the dais. Speakers, Professor B.P. Sanjay, former Vice Chancellor, Central University of Tamil Nadu, and former Pro-Vice Chancellor, University of Hyderabad. Dr. Sunil Mehru, Joint Director, CEC, New Delhi. Professor Jayashree Jetwani, Visiting Professor, ISID former Professor, and Program Director, IIMC. Dr. Shashwati Gangopadhyay, Professor, Department of Mass Communication, University of Burdwan, West Bengal. Our rapporteur for this session is Dr. Jayant Swain, Assistant Professor, Ravenshaw University. Professor Biswajit Das, sir, you may please start your session.
Good afternoon. I would rather say that I'm indeed honored and privileged to be a chair amongst all these celebrities in the field of media and communication studies. And the theme is very, very contemporary as well as contentious. Very contemporary as well as contentious. I'm sure all of you know about when you talk about pluralism, it has a very checkered history. Checkered history in larger social science literature, more specifically in political science. However, there is a problem when we connect with the term media pluralism, and there are two terms which are alternately used. One is pluralism and the other one is diversity. When we talk about media pluralism, somewhere or the other we have been also engaging with the diversity. What does it mean? What does it imply? We normally talk about the voices, the sources, then channels. So we try to sort of identify diversity of voices, diversity of sources. In a way, we try to see diversities. But again, when you look at the larger literature within media pluralism, you find that we broadly talk about two distinct kinds of pluralism when you classify. We talk about internal pluralism and external pluralism. Then when we talk about internal pluralism, you talk about larger structures of broadcasting and so on, in what way. And it also reminds me that pluralism as an idea is basically a concept which emerged within larger 17th century debates within journalism and media. So that is where you talked about that what news should be, what media should be, the idea of nobility, what you call in a way as subsequently we talked about media as a public good, So like a welfare state, media was rendering services. In that context, we were talking about media as a public good. But subsequently, we find that along with privatization and globalization, whatever you say, that media gradually moved towards what you call a marketplace of ideas. So we moved from a public good to a marketplace of ideas. So like any other good, now media will be sold in the market. In fact, today, since morning, 2-3 terms which have been time and again raised, but we never problematize them. One is, of course, interaction. One is interaction, interactivity. And the second one is about platform. We all talked about platform. Now today we have entered an era, what we call platform capitalism. In fact, this is the most celebrated book called Platform Capitalism. Now platform is the site where you find all the technologies, they converge. And that is a one area where now future is, whether you look at Uber, Google, and all these platforms. Now scholars have been sort of trying to more engage in terms of its future implications. Now, I just would like to leave it here and in fact rather invite my esteemed colleagues and teachers. Should we start with Professor B.P. Sanjay? Welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Biswajit, chair of this session, distinguished fellow presenters, and post-lunch audience. which is not a representative of the plurality and diversity we talk about, but nevertheless. Yes, the paper has been, captured in the publication. And we have had a few pointers since morning, stemming from the philosophical to a highly futuristic possibility of the era that we live in. Being an academician and not necessarily carrying the baggage of pessimism and cynicism, one has to recognize and share the optimism and euphoria of the times that we live in. Now, communication technologies have always encountered at various stages of their introduction basic challenges, and these basic challenges are embedded both in the knowledge and the power structures. Now, the redundancy of these realities, if I might say, always has negotiated the governance system. And when we talk about the governance system, beginning from the modernization and the nation building objective of media or mass media, as one might call it, the impetus has been that it has to necessarily change, social change in a very broad term has been frequently used. And repeatedly, time and again, paradigms have come, gone, and many have retained their flavor. Repeatedly, the one thing that strikes at the root of media communication has been the question of whether media and communication correlate with corresponding changes in the structures of the society that we live in. And whether it is the much maligned North American communication scholarship, or the most celebrated and almost deified European scholarship of the critical studies variety, structures and basic realities are at the base of all our concerns. But technology and, if I might use the word, capitalism, has a very resilient way of dealing with the contradictions in communication of any era. When we thought of unilinear models of mass-mediated communication, there was always a concern that it's not feedback, or feedback is not commensurate with the number of readers or viewers. But that has come to be a passe because um, for commodification of communication to go on, it is always important that the basic articulated concerns are addressed upfront by the technology manufacturer and the technology companies. Therefore, today we live in a situation where 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, 6.0, it doesn't matter. We live in a situation where people appear to believe that we have come a full circle and the loop is complete. Now, making an argument merely for the sake of diversity and plurality has several layers. One is at what point in time the diversity, plurality of our own context either is real or concrete or needs to be negotiated is one aspect. For example, till such time the Indian language media's relationship between capitalism and commodification was established, Indian language media was always seen at the periphery of the mass media system. Till such time, when internet came along, there was this worldwide concern and debate of digital divide or exclusion, inclusion. Language was a variable. And today, technologies, and call it keyboard or whatever it is, platforms, software, etc., have very aptly addressed this. For example, the director of CAC this morning talked about the genuine efforts of the higher education system to cater to a large number of aspirants. So is diversity essentially a policy option for the present structure? As in, digital divide is one argument. Now we are talking about the inclusivity for many other reasons apart from communication. If you see the 9 or 10 planks on which Digital India prefaces itself in all the documents so far, communication of the kind that we talk about is not necessarily in the forefront of its argument. It talks about highways, it talks about networking, etc., etc. So the old notion of governance reaching out to the people through in the digital highways or pathways that we are talking about has come to, confront us. Now, as a researcher, as a person who is interested in looking at the future generation of communication and media scholars, how can diversity be studied? Do we study it to celebrate that we are diverse? Or do we study it to understand that the flow of information and thereby knowledge societies is not as prolific as the digital era claims? Because it is not prolific, multiplicity of information sources do not necessarily encourage diversity of perspectives. And this goes back to the earlier session. Are diversity and plurality the basic axis of democracy? If one wants to argue that they are, then somebody asked the question, what does digital do? I think the reference was to the EVM machines or just casting it. A lot of apprehensions are there in this process. Direct beneficiary linkages in the communication platforms that we are talking about may have a significant correlation with voting patterns in the future. Bound to happen, likely to happen. Because the linkages between what you exercise and the incentive that you get can be scientifically linked as a celebration of digital age in the future. Let me give you an example of education. Indian education system has expanded. We had the GER figures, etc. But Indian education system has also focused a lot on assimilation of knowledge and production of that knowledge to indicate the productivity of the scholars. Many youngsters sitting here are now spending sleepless nights on API scores, their next promotion, blah, 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 etc. But where does the repository of knowledge in the university system now reside? It is based on dynamics of digital publication. Is there diversity and plurality of information in the academic literature? I have not done a web index study, but I am sure that when UGC was trying to look at the basket of journals, it perforce had to reject many journals. 75 to 80% of the journals it rejected came from our own country. Now, a knowledge worker would argue that what are we celebrating in productivity in publication? I'm just looking at one consequence of the digital era. Verification, validity, etc., is there. And what do I use as my knowledge sources for publishing an article? The frameworks that we have in communication and media, apart from a very strong belief in our philosophical foundations, are still epistemologically defined.
Please sum up in 2 minutes.
By a limited framework. And that framework needs to expand. Last point I would like to say is, P.C. Joshi, when the software committee came, and I think it was Kiran Karnik also said, we live in an era of poverty amidst plenty. Digital age has brought a surfeit of resources and access, but the real challenge for researchers in their own small communities to understand how has it translated for not only articulations of opinions, but also assimilation of knowledge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Sanjay, for a brilliant start on the idea of diversity. I would just sum up by saying that center, for the last couple of years, my center, we were engaged in developing a kind of a media diversity index. and I'm sure that you will have an access to kind of data and other things and how we can develop in future idea about, can we frame, idea is that the more the diversity, the better the health of democracy. And that is the idea propositions we began. And we sort of tried to sum up a lot of data, even though in India, you know that it's very difficult to have a kind of a series of data, but doesn't matter, you can do a triangulation and can really organize the data and can put it so you can see the data and also the map so that you can graphically see where there are the links between media and democracy and the kind of diversities. Thank you. I now invite Dr. Sunil Mehru to be brief, 10 minutes each, sir.
Honorable Director CEC, Chairman Professor Vishwajit Das sir, distinguished speakers and the audience. The topic of my presentation is CEC's experiments with media plurality or diversity. It's a joint paper and the vision is of Director CEC Professor J.B. Nadda sir, and I'm here to present the vision. We'll start with media diversity or pluralism. And media pluralism refers to the plurality of voices, opinions, and analysis on media system and the coexistence of different and diverse type of medias and media support. Agil. Next. Next. There are two types of pluralism. One is internal pluralism that focuses on media content, especially diversity of content. Whereas the second type is external pluralism that covers various media channels, media organizations in order to ensure a free choice of media content and the availability of a wide variety of opinions and ideas. CEC focused on internal pluralism as the objective of CEC is to disseminate education to the masses with its diversified content. The consortium categorically worked on the strategies to develop diversified content, and the range starts from documentary, video programs, e-content with 4-quadrant approach, concepts for better understanding in the form of SLOs, short learning objects, 1 to 2 minute duration, and then massive open online courses. I'll start with the first experiment in media pluralism or diversity, site experiment. To provide variety of the content, site experiment was the first experiment of media pluralism in India in the field of education. The experiment was made to replicate classroom teaching, resulting in countrywide classroom, CWCR. Site or the satellite interactive television experiment was communication satellite experiment done for the first time in India. This project was launched in the year 1975. It was designed by Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, and NASA. The ultimate objective of the experiment was to educate the people of India on various issues via satellite broadcasting, and also to help India gain technical experience in the field of satellite communication. The site program ended in July 1976. The site transmission had a very significant impact in plurality of voices, opinions, and analysis around the Indian villages. For the entire year, thousands of villagers gathered around the TV sets and watched the shows. These experiments demonstrated that satellite TV could play a very important role in providing education in plurality. Site showed that India could make use of advanced technology to fulfill the socio-economic needs of the country. Taking advantage of the Indian experience from satellite interactive television experiment and Doordarshan's growing demand for television software. University Grants Commission UGC, the apex body of higher education in India, decided to exploit the potential of television for the cause of higher education and launched UGC countrywide classroom on Doordarshan National Network on 15th August 1984. Then again, EduSat Plurality of Voices. In September 2004, Indian Space Research Organization launched education satellite named as EduSat, which was the first satellite in the world built exclusively to serve the education sector. EduSat is used to meet the demands of an interactive satellite-based distance education system for India. It serves the objective of plurality of voices, opinions, and analysis through two-way interactive communication, where students can interact live with the teacher, is an example of media pluralism. Coming about CEC, e-content development. We have started e-content development under 87 undergraduate subjects in the year 2011. The concept of plurality or diversity of content development was strategically planned to curl out a maximum and also to provide variety of the content to the stakeholders. And the slogan is one program, diversified content and pluralistic approach. We produce half an hour video program, one single video program, and out of that one single program, we again chunked out in 4 to 6 parts of the complete program based on the various objectives for web-based e-content application. Same content is being strengthened with its unique 4-quadrant pluralistic approach. One is text resources. Second, we discussed the video resources in chunked form. Then the web resources, references, links, and the self-assessment. Again, the pluralistic approach, and from this half an hour video program, we curl out small learning objectives of 1 to 2 minutes and produced SLOs, short learning objects. And this is the template, true template of pluralism. With the vision again of my boss, Professor J.B. Nadda sir, we have started Gurukul live transmission from CEC premises. It is also based on concept of pluralism, which is being transmitted live on Vyas Higher Education Channel, website on CEC website, webcast on gov.in government portal, and further uploaded on YouTube for wider dissemination. Then the concept which is in place very soon, the flipped concept of the content. CEC is in process of developing flipped learning environment through its upcoming new website. It is also based on the concept of media pluralism. It will be the unique platform with diversified content and option to flip from one format of program to another format of content production to break the monotony. It has following options to sustain the viewer's interest with its pluralistic approach. Watch videos, lectures, the serious content which is being delivered by the teacher. Then, or if you want to flip, you can flip to 1 to 2 minute concept videos to learn concepts. Again, flip to watch infotainment documentaries on the same topic to experience the in-depth content. Flip to text resources to read the content. And it's an overall pluralistic approach to understand the entire concept with in-depth content. Okay, sir. Flipped classes provides you ease to choose your own option to study, freedom to flip from documentary to curriculum classes to concept classes or to the reading material text resources. CEC committed to provide plurality of content on a single click, and that is visit to http://cec.nic.in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sunilji, for such a wonderful introspection about your own organization, giving an organizational ethnography, that how to read CEC as a sense of a pluralism or plurality, bringing the idea of even looking much more interesting is about site experiment. I think you actually opened the Pandora box about site experiment, because site has never been studied so seriously except the early evaluation reports about site, or what even Vinod Agarwal has done a lot of evaluations about site in different parts of India, I think mostly on 5 to 6 states in India, that if at all that you consider. But I think also scholars subsequently, those who have studied sites, they've also realized that site was centrally controlled. Site was centrally controlled, and that was a major failure of programs elsewhere. What was conceived in Doordarshan or in the Mandi House could never be, what you think about whether in Andhra Pradesh or in Orissa or in Rajasthan, they're all varied in terms of the weather. So what was centralized? So in that sense, when I look at the content diversity, I would say that it was basically nothing. There was no diversity of content at all. So I would say that there was no content diversity. So what you are referring is about plurality of content, is actually you are talking about content diversity. So I would be rather very excited to know about CEC's entire material and the way you can give a larger analysis of looking at the kind of production of material and how content-wise you can organize the material to look at the diversity issues. Diversity means not about the content, even the voices, the sources. There are so many issues of diversity, what we are referring. And pluralism or plurality are very slippery concepts, very slippery concepts. In fact, talking about pluralism today, especially in a marketplace of ideas, probably would be extremely difficult. In fact, John Keane talks about media abundance. Today in the morning, Dr. Padi was referring to the term media abundance. So we live in an era of media abundance. So now how does one frame media abundance? I think it's easy to talk about platform. When I look at the platform, I'm getting more and more fixed to Netflix, more and more fixed to the Netflix. Now how does one look at the larger sense of plurality in the platform itself? I think these are larger questions. I would like to reserve it for when we open the session. Now, without taking much time, I would like to invite you for your presentation.
With your permission, can I speak from here? I like eye-to-eye contact. All right, great. So, Chairman, sir, colleagues on the dais, colleagues off the dais, and young students. In fact, my target audience are not the scholars who are all wise, but the students who have a long life to go and who are still in college and have to work through their way to passing their BAs and MAs. I'll take it from where Professor Das left, the plurality and the abundance of material. In my paper, I took two issues: the shift of gatekeeping function and the technology, how technology has changed the way we live our lives. So a lot of young students, so I would like to tell you both, are these really voices or noises when you look at the digital space, and how the classical media, now which is called the legacy media, which is already dead, how the legacy media has, it doesn't really have that agenda setting function, or it doesn't really have the gatekeeping function. It has passed it on to digital media. I keep doing a lot of research, so what I'm going to share with you are some glimpses of the researches which I have undertaken the last few years, so that they have some practical relevance for you, especially young scholars. So when you say gatekeeping function, generally, maybe 20 years ago, we thought that newspapers were the ones which were setting the agenda for the day, and they had the gatekeeping function. But now you find that because the OTT, the over-the-top, platforms, And if you see the GAFAM, the Google, the Microsoft, the Apple, the Amazon, and the Facebook, they started as aggregators of information, now they become media unto themselves. And they are the ones who are calling the shots. About 4 years ago, I did a research along with a very major consultancy because I had a gut feel that the sources of news for the media guys are changing. And our hypothesis came right because we found that more than 90% people in 2013-14, now we are 19, there was huge net dependence. So they said that the first thing they do in the morning is they don't pick up a newspaper to read what happened yesterday, but they go to the net to see what is trending, which means they set their agenda, what are they going to write about. It came from the digital media and not the other sources of information. The other thing you find that, all of a sudden with the digital age, again the gatekeeping function, there are a lot of influencers who are there on the net, a lot of accidental opinion makers. If you look at the net, reach, more than 1 billion pages are uploaded every day. More than 200 hours of, videos are uploaded every hour on the YouTube. So there's so many people, about 7 billion people in the world. So most of us, at least 1.5 billion people, are writing or uploading in a hope that someone somewhere someday is going to read or watch what they have to say. And you find that they have opinion on everything under the earth. In the morning, Dr. Roy spoke about the thin and the crisp, what is thin and light messages. When they come from the horse's mouth, many people are playing doctors on their digital. If somebody has diabetes and he's telling his people, followers, this medicine is better than the one, I tried 3 years ago. And people feel these, pharma companies must be cheating us. This guy who is a diabetic patient herself or himself is telling the right thing. So there's immediate believability in what these accidental opinion makers are saying. The other thing which has happened, which has made the life of information officer, the information apparatus absolutely useless. Now you find the ministers, the prime minister, anything which they have to say, they tweet it. So they have no role to play really. Otherwise, information departments were the catalysts, they were the people between the people and the media. Now the media guys, they don't depend on an information officer anymore. So they have to also reinvent themselves in writing backgrounders, writing featureized kind of, press releases to give them more information. Let us look at what has happened in terms of the life of an average person. When you go to a class, if you have a class of 80 people, chances are the last 3 rows, people are wedded to their iPods, iPads, or their smartphones. If you ask them, what are you doing? They say, ma'am, we are, or sir, we are writing the notes. I can assure you, I've been teacher for more than 25 years. They are wedded to the net. They're not really taking notes, or they might be watching the Netflix or something. But as students, as youngsters, people have talked about the information overload. There's so much information available. You should have the capability to understand what is right, what is not right, and where does it come. In fact, while I was listening to, I'm almost the 14th or 15th speaker since morning, and the dilemma is that everything wanted to say has already been said. So what I started doing while sitting there was trying to see, taking cues from what was being said, what could be the possible areas of research which you should be conducting. A lot is changing. Like in the beginning we thought digital media was a huge democratic platform. Many of us don't think so. In fact, if you see recently, Mark Zuckerberg was invited to the Congress and he was pulled up, he was admonished for what the Facebook was doing. They said, you are nurturing hate groups. So do you call it plurality of voices? No. There's huge polarization of voices, and you find we have become all of a sudden very, very political. And you find that, unfortunately, women are at the receiving end. There's so much gender insensitivity on the net which is not so much on television or on in the print media, there are journalists. If you are a political journalist, if you have a political view, you are trolled, you are stalked, and what kind of expletives are used. And I was reading in the West, some researches are being done on 3 journalists in India, Barkha Dutt, Sagarika Ghosh, and Rana Ayub, I think. How, what kind of stuff is being written when they're doing their normal duty of being a journalist. So being in media is not so easy, okay? So as young journalists, as people who are potential journalists, media people, you must understand the media carefully, and also you must not fall trapped. There are a lot of predators. You are still a little older, but we find a lot of predators on the digital platform, and the huge exploitation of the children. I'm playing devil's advocate. So it's very important for us to understand the media per se. I'll just take 2 minutes. So I just wrote down a few things which you could research on. We could look at the tenacity of various media for survival, copyright violations then and now. Now if you post, in fact a woman post a child's video, he was dancing to a tune of some famous singer, and immediately it was withdrawn saying it's a copyright violation. So you must understand how technology is changing the way journalists present the news. Paying for news online, if you see what is appearing, it's not really always journalistic write-ups there. A lot of public relations people, they're designing information, they're orchestrating information on behalf of corporates. There are a lot of brand endorsements on Facebook, where the people are paid for what they say about the brands, news used on various social media platforms, brand endorsement by influencers, audience analytics, steering news production. If you see the filter bubbles, now what you read, digital media would like to see more of that and avoid you looking at divergent news. So you can work on that. Venture-backed news startups, challenges and implications, how technology firms are steering political communication, the danger of filter bubbles, artificial intelligence used in the newsroom implications, Twitter ideological segregations, and extinction of the government spokesperson space, and the implications of Twitter. So I thought there are some of the areas which one could look at seriously. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam, for sticking to time. I would just like to say the summit by saying that many is not diverse. So if you look at television channels across, you may not find diversity at all, because they all sing the same song, they speak alike, and they also behave alike. So don't remain with this mystery that there are so many channels, means there is a diversity, not at all. Yes, so I said that many is not diverse. Many may be similar as well. So this is a proposition. And before that, I just wanted to also engage with some of your observations. Yes, indeed, that there are so many issues that can be problematized. But copyright is one issue. You said about what in the digital era and prior to digital era. I think it reminds me a report which we submitted to Ministry of Information and Broadcasting on copyrights. Privacy and copyrights. So I was just jokingly mentioning that when we celebrate Pirates of the Caribbean, Johnny Depp, why not we also celebrate pirates in the entire digital sphere? So I said, let pirate be a stakeholder in the entire media production process, because it was a combination of a lot of filmmakers and production units. They were all coming and screaming that the film's revenue and everything is collapsing, but they had managed all kinds of mechanisms to track if you capture, if you shoot inside the cinema hall, because there are chips which are already there in the screen itself to capture you if you are doing it. So already there are a bunch of organizations working to track you as a copyright violation. In spite of that, you are not able to succeed or do it. It means pirates in the entire digital process. There are several phases were involved. So you can't say that I think we need to rethink and re-articulate the term of privacy and the piracies, because these are no more comfortable, or there will be any intellectual purchase about these kind of discussions or conversations. Probably these are borrowed ideas which are time and again we are sort of trying to spill over in our context, so we need to problematize. And one most important thing you talked about that we miss is about media literacy. Media literacy, how to read a media text, and there is a lack of consciousness, and whether we are doing media literacy for citizenship or kind of building a kind of a citizen. I think this is in India which is completely missing, because we understand that our understanding of media literacy is very hollow, very narrow perspective. We have never problematized media literacy, like we have moved away from oral to literate. In what way you talk about media literacy, that we have never engaged, because historically literacy was always denied to thousands of people or millions of people, a section of class and caste in Indian society. It took almost centuries to overcome, and today we find that we need to bridge, and we understand in what context do you define a term media literacy. And totally there are visuals everywhere, social media is everywhere, so sort of trying to, as you said rightly, about certain sections, certain communities, certain gender are targeted, whether it is on a social media or Facebook or anywhere. So I'm saying that it lacks a complete literacy. It lacks an education about media, how to decode, how to read media, how to understand media. Rather, it has been aggressively used, media against media. Yes, so I think these are larger questions which I think we as scholars should be engaged in future. I mean, rather than, as I said about, it should not be carried away, what you call inertia of the past and shock of the new. So suddenly you see digital, you all jump up and say that, look, we see so many problems in digital without knowing what has happened in the past in terms of the work. I think we lack connection. We lack connection when we talk about digital. I mean, today, as in the morning, we had discussions. We lack complete connection of cultural history of technology, cultural history of technologies, because we do not see in that context. Now see digital and how, in what way it is a progression and in what way it is leading to diversity. And I think we need to get back to that soon. So without, now I request Saraswati to make your presentation. Right, do that.
Thank you, Professor Das. Would you just give the first slide, please? I'm not really reading out whatever I've written there. What I'd like to say is that we all know that earlier we had information was in the hands of just a few people, whether it was media persons or government. But I'm just giving an example. 1999, when the Kargil scheme happened, actually, whatever we had, we were listening or viewing information that was coming from some sources. Now we come to Balakot. Recently it has happened. Apart from Facebook, trending in Twitter, going viral in WhatsApp, I can also check Dawn, the Pakistani newspaper. I have been continuously looking at it and looking at how they have given the same particular story, which at least in 1999 we didn't have that access. So I guess digital era has lessened the control on information. And I think this has led to many common people to respond to news and information more quickly and easily. Now I'm not saying whether as a user or as a producer, but yeah, they are in a position to access information. Not just from different segments, but also from their own group of people. And they are in a position right now to choose which one to accept and which one to reject. Next one, please. Now, we are looking at this, that the audience is now able to contribute as producers of information. Now, when we say producers of information, I'm not just getting into very heavy things like politics and all. Regularly, people are updating on traffic, on weather, which are information, simple information for everyday life, and that is being contributed by the audience themselves, and we find it often on Twitter, on Facebook, on WhatsApp. So I think even informally people are giving information. And most mass mediums are available online, whether it is a e-paper or a e-zine or web radio, online television, anything. The common citizenry is able to access and also produce information and disseminate it also. So primarily I would say that it is becoming increasingly possible for general public to give information, and if they wish to share it with a niche audience, they can. If they wish to share with a larger audience, at least they are having the platform, which again digital media has given. Now some individuals who are very astute have been able to create content which they have, they might have some agenda, and they spread it, which may go to a small group or large groups. They may not be journalists, but their contents range from very personal issues of content to information and opinion. Next one, please. When I'm speaking about this term now, if we look at the second sentence, now a new form of alternative media. When we talk about alternative media and participatory communication, because we are talking about media pluralism here, we have blogs, of course, microblogs like Twitter, social networking sites, instant messaging, with citizens participating as journalists. With the help of digital technology, we have been able to create thoughts and ideas, and it has also filled up spaces which have been left by professionals due to several constraints. I mean, if we look at it, every news media has an agenda, and accordingly they have to give the news or content. Whereas in case of the people or the public, they don't need to have agenda, and they can, give information and opinion without thinking of any sort of, I would say, gatekeeping. Please. Now, when we are looking at the blogs, the citizen journalists are mostly non-professionals who are not used to working in the hierarchical setups which journalists are accustomed to, and hence the content may be somewhat different from that of journalists. If you find, many of us when we read blogs or even on microblogging sites or in Facebook, we have seen many people give information, but they are not given in the normal way a journalist would give, obviously because they are not journalists professionally, and they may not know the inverted pyramid style, or they may not have to follow a house policy or a house style. Now when we are looking at blogs come in diverse types, which may be political, social, which have a committed group of followers and people with the similar kinds of interests normally follow. The size of the audience may be big or small, depending on the content, but they are comparable to the niche viewership or readership of specialty magazines or television channels. Now, when we look at blogs, a typical blog, I'm not getting to the definition and all, it's already given there. Like, blogs have certain inherent elements in them which are democratic, which have democratic characteristics, which lead to different ideas or divergent views, which may not always be possible in public domain, particularly in mainstream media. So here alternative journalism is emerging, which is leading to pluralistic ideas. I mean, many bloggers link their blogs with Facebook and other social media platforms for more readers. And audience anywhere in the world, if they are interested, can access these blogs. And it is quite well known that the journalists in mainstream media give topics to the audience which they feel pertinent and leave out the ones which they feel is redundant. Obviously, they follow a pattern and they have their constraints as professionals. Whereas in case of blogs, it's the interest of the target audience or to some extent the opinion of the bloggers which come in handy and the interactions happen as such. Next one, I think I'm going, yeah. Now, I've given something. Nowadays, journalists are no longer required to set the agenda. They follow what is the most trending issue online, their websites included. I think Madam just spoke on that a little while back, that nowadays journalists are not setting agenda, whether it is a news channel, TV channel or a newspaper, they all have their own websites, and they also, apart from the regular news that they want to give, of course they do have a certain amount of topics which they wish to speak on, also they follow what is trending, what their audience wants, and those are also given. So in most cases, I personally feel journalists have become more of guides and mentors rather than gatekeepers. Next one, please. Thank you. So if you're looking at journalists now are, they have to look at bloggers, not merely as non-professionals who are, giving information, but rather as alternative voices who will provide opportunities, and also they give the audience a scope for immediate feedback. And sometimes we also see many journalists, I can give the name of one, Poranjoy Gohakurta, who told me when I met him last that he is also an avid blogger, though initially he was a mainstream journalist. Now he writes for different newspapers and magazines, plus also as a blogger, they are able to, as bloggers, they are able to give their opinion without thinking about the policy of the media organization. So even now, many journalists have turned to blogging to give new ideas, new opinions, which normally they might not have been able to do so openly if they had worked in the payroll of a newspaper organization or a news media. So, initially I would say the personal nature of a blog helps to engage the readers better. However, it has to be sustained, the blogs have to be sustained with proper content. Okay, sir, I'll just wrap it up. However, there is a bit of caution. The problem of credibility of blogs is always there. And because anybody can write blogs without not just following journalistic ethics, but also without any responsibility. At least a journalist has a responsibility. His newspaper house or a news media house has a responsibility. Whereas a blogger may not have that. So, as a note of caution, blogs which use credible hyperlinks are trusted the most, and the ones which are regular and give balanced opinion and news are trusted the most. Okay. Last but not the least, that even if there is any authenticity issue and all, but we have to understand that this has come to stay. Blogs and other digital platforms which will give news and opinion are here to stay, and if not as additional source, weblogs have now become an additional source, if not an alternative source for news propagation, along with established institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasaki, for covering a very wide range.
Are trying to learn a lot, because these are two strong words and phrases which has been used, and I'm sure they are now struggling to understand what actually should be done. However, that was a very exciting session. And now, before we wrap up with the plenary session 2, I would call Professor Dr. Upendra Padhi to come up on stage and felicitate. Professor Dr. Upendra Padhi felicitating Chairman Professor Biswajit Das. A loud round of applause, please. Dr. Padhi felicitating Dr. Sunil Mehru. Dr. Padhi felicitating Professor Jayashree Jatwani. And Dr. Padhi felicitating Dr. Shashwati Gangopadhyay. A loud round of applause, please.